A lot of the times I get asked this question by atheists. Doesn't religion actually cause a lot of violence? Wouldn't we be better off um, if we did not have religion? Wouldn't that help to stop the violence? Let's answer this question today. The top five religions in the world are Christianity and Islam. They account for the majority of the world population. After that, we have people who don't identify with any particular religion, uh, can call them unaffiliated, and that's followed by Hinduism and a whole lot of other religions. I want to focus on this topic as a Christian. Let's look first at early Christianity. For the first 300 years or so, Christians were living under the Roman rule. Christians Christianity spread in spite of violence. Of the 12 apostles, only one of them lived and died a normal death. All the others were either crucified or martyred by other means. The apostolic fathers, after the time of the apostles, their successors, St. Ignatius of Antioch, for example, St. Polycarp of Smyrna, St. Ignatius boldly went to his death in the Colosseum, and he was ready to be eaten by the wild beasts. He, in fact, encouraged the fellow Christians, saying that I am the bread of Christ, and may I be ground by the teeth of the wild beast, so that I may become the pure bread of Christ. If we go look at the first 300 years of Christianity, there were several persecutions by Roman emperors. The Emperor Nero, from 37 to 68 AD, Vespasian, 69 to 79 AD, Domitian, 81 to 96 AD, Trajan, 98 to 117, Hadrian, 170 to 138 AD, Marcus Aurelius, 161 to 180, Maximinus the Thracian, 235 to 238, Decius, 249 to 251, Valerian, 253 to 260, Diocletian, 284 to 305. We're looking at persecutions throughout the first 3 centuries, a constant threat of Christian life, number of martyrs who are giving their blood for the faith. And this goes to show that they really know what they believe is true. Nobody would die for something if it were not true and if it did not make all the difference in the world. So Christianity really spread in spite of violence. In fact, St. Paul wrote a lot of letters. If we look at the New Testament, we have the letter to the Romans, the Corinthians, Thessalonians, Galatians, Philippians, Ephesians. And all of these letters are to all these different places, either cities or regions like Rome, Corinth, Ephesus, and so on. And all of these were communities that were formed in the first century itself. Christianity spread in spite of being under persecution through the first few centuries. Now, if we look at the Edict of Milan, how did Christianity finally get peace? It was because the Emperor Constantine converted to Christianity, and in the year 325 AD issued the Edict of Milan, and under this edict Christians could worship freely. Now let's move on to the time after the Edict of Milan. Christianity did have a time of peace, and it could the Benedictine order, for example, was established during this time, and Christianity could build up, and Christianity could have ecumenical councils, and that peace brought some stability within Christianity itself. But this was not to last for long. It was going to be about 300 years. We would see even an attack into to Rome itself. The Arab raid of 846 AD, that occurred through. So let's go a little back, looking at Islam itself. So Prophet Muhammad, around the year 610 AD, he claims to have been visited by the angel Gabriel. Well, the fact is that his uncle owned a place of worship called the Kaaba, and this place there were Jews and Christians who used to come to worship. So he was exposed to these religions. And we see a lot of elements of Judaism and Christianity in Islam. For example, the sacrifice of Abraham sacrificing his son. In Christianity, in Judaism, it is Isaac who was sacrificed, but in Islam, it is Ishmael. And there's a lot of connections, but there's also a lot of confusions in Islam and inconsistencies with Judaism and Christianity. Anyway, the Prophet Muhammad, he dies in 630 AD, and after his death, there are the sects of Sunnism and Shiaism, because they cannot decide who is the successor and who is going to be the authority in Islam after the Prophet Muhammad. And they have the establishment of the caliphates, where they have the Sharia law, the Islamic law, and there's a widespread conquests all across the Arabian Peninsula, all across the Middle East. Islam spreads. It spreads to Egypt and the North African countries, which are modern day Tunisia and Libya and Morocco. In the year 711 AD, Islam enters into the Iberian Peninsula. The Tariq ibn Ziyad defeats Roderick, and Islam is established in Spain. The Emirate of Sicily is formed in 831 AD, and now we have the Arab raid of Rome in 839 AD. They arrive at the Porto and Ostia, and they move up the Tiber River into Rome. Now, St. Peter's and St. Paul's outside the walls were noted as filled to overflowing with rich liturgical vessels and with jeweled reliquaries housing all of the relics recently amassed, among them the golden cross, Farum Hadriani, and the silver table given by Emperor Constantine. Now, what happens is these holy shrines are desecrated. All of the wealth which was used to adorn the beautiful holy shrines is taken off and torn off and taken away as plunder. And what is the Christian response now? Well, Pope Leo responds almost immediately soon after, and the Christian response is no, it's not violence. The Pope Leo builds the Leonine walls around the city of Rome, and this is the only Christian response for almost 300 years. Now, moving on from here, we have the Crusades that happen almost 300 years later. It is the year 1096 that the First Crusade is launched. And why is the First Crusade launched? Well, if you were living in Europe and during that time, you would want to go to Jerusalem. You wanted to go to the place where Christ walked. You would want to go on the Via Dolorosa, and you would there would be a lot of pilgrims going who could afford it to Jerusalem. Now, since the whole of the Middle East was in Muslim hands, Christians wanted to be able to go and worship peacefully, because all this time there was a lot of danger to life. People were dying, people were robbed, and they wanted to secure this pilgrimage route. So the Pope called for the First Crusade, and in the year 1096, they launched the First Crusade. There was a lot of people. Initially, there was a Peasants' Crusade, which was not very successful. But the First Crusade, there were generals who led the soldiers, and it was an organized campaign. They went via Constantinople, and then they besieged Antioch. And eventually that led them to Jerusalem, and they besieged Jerusalem, and they established the Kingdom of Jerusalem. At this time, there were groups like the Templars and the Hospitallers, and it was in fact banking was in fact invented during this time. If you were a pilgrim going to the Holy Land, you would go to a temple. The place of the Templars was called as a temple. So you would go to a temple in London and you would deposit your money, and you would get a written note from the Templars, and you could take that note to the Holy Land, and you would not be a sitting target for the raiders and robbers on the way. You could um, withdraw the money as you need it on the way, and you could use it for your for whatever you needed, right? For buying food and so on. So this was a period of history where there was a necessary, justified action by the church, and this was mainly to secure the pilgrimage route. In fact, military historians, they say that if the Crusaders had gone just a few hundred kilometers further, they would have completely and permanently destroyed and incapacitated the Muslim powerhouse, and they would have made it impossible for them to retaliate for the next few hundred years. But they did not do that. Their target was Jerusalem, securing the pilgrimage route, and once they achieved that, they stopped right there and they established the kingdom of Jerusalem. Now this went on for some years. There were follow-up crusades, and why did the crusades finally stop? Well, it was the third crusade where there was a battle between Richard, the Lionheart, and Saladin, and after this battle, there was a treaty between the Christians and the Muslims that the Christian lands would remain open for the pilgrimage of Christians, and under these terms and conditions, the Crusades ended. Now, if we look at the rest of the world as well, um, we have today Christianity widespread in Latin America, and it was the primarily um, the apparition of Our Lady of Guadalupe in Mexico, which got a lot of converts to the Christian faith. Um, During that period, if we read the Acts of the Apostles, there were 3,000 added to the number of Christians. And if we look at Latin America after the apparition of Our Lady of Guadalupe, the average number is in that range of 3,000 were added to their number throughout that period for the next 3 years. So it wasn't as if Christianity was spread by violence. In fact, it spread often in spite of violence. If we look at Asia and Australia, there were a lot of missionary efforts by Saint Francis Xavier, and Christianity spread through that. And yet, it was only in certain pockets like Goa in India where Christianity spread. And in spite of a lot of violence, the Christians continued to to work as missionaries in these places. Australia also was discovered much later, and the British went there. And again,